Let me share my thoughts right now on what it takes to run and create a successful organization or a group of any kind. That could include a rock band, that could include a business or performing arts group. Any idea where you're creating a culture, a society of people, a community in which you have brought together people with a similar vision to create something, to experience something together. Now, I've done this a few times. My first business, which was Limelight Publishing, was a CD-ROM DVD publisher, which grew quite well. I started it when I was very young. I brought in a couple of people. I was actually invited in by some executives of Sony. And a small team starting it, coming up with an idea, planting that, and then gradually growing the business. We ended up with 25 employees and $8 million a year in revenue. And that was my first ever entrepreneurial business experience as a kid. That was a really fascinating ride. Lots happened, good and bad. It was a lot of stress. I didn't know how to handle it. Appreciated what was going on at the time, but not as fully as I should have. That's a discussion for another time. Second, there were quite a few other organizations that I started as well. The most notable ones would be many years later when I started a performing arts group called the Tamashii Taiko Drummers. Similar thing, small group of people, happened to be 3 people again, with a common vision and an idea of what we wanted to do, some excitement. We came together and we began playing with this idea. What can we do? Let's plant some seeds. And that community ended up attracting others, and then others, and then others. And over the last 10 years, that group has grown quite strong. Now 60 to 100 students a year, and at any given time, all of them paying 60 performances a year. The company does just under $100,000 a year in revenue and pays for all of its costs. It's a beautiful community where the space, the van, the petroleum, the promotions, everything is self-contained and handled by that organization, much like a dance studio. And they get to have a lot of fun experiencing, practicing, playing with that art. And that was the whole point. That was the dream that we really had from the beginning. And now, of course, Brojo, which you're obviously a part of. Another community which involved a small group of people with an idea, working together to create that idea. Gradually grows, we gradually learn, we gradually stop and reflect to see what can we do next. Many meetings where we'd sit down, we referred to them as sales and marketing meetings, where we'd sit down and say, how do we grow? That didn't work. What should we try next? Let's try a Facebook ad. That didn't work, and that was expensive. What can we try next? Constantly playing with different ideas, trying to explore and learn as we go, and encounter the challenges and the solutions together. In each of these cases, I'm seeing a pattern, and this is what I wanted to talk about. There are a lot of commonalities in these experiences that I've had, and I think they would probably relate well to other success stories that I've seen out there in the world. And these are the things I've identified. The first thing is that in each case, it started with a small group of visionaries, of people who had the same idea. There was a thread of curiosity that they all shared, but individually there were slightly different skills involved, slightly different strengths and weaknesses that we identified early on and that we were able to complement each other with. The best example with my first business, Limelight Publishing, was that I was the tech guy. That was what I did best. I was a young tech guy, a product visionary. I had these wonderful ideas for great products. I didn't know a thing about sales, didn't know a thing about hiring employees, didn't know a thing about business, running a business, paying taxes, finding a place to put the employees. Had no idea about any of that, but I knew how to make a product. As a result, I was given the responsibility for the product. I did what I did best, and I didn't have to worry at all about the other problems. Those were handled by my two partners. And that made things possible. We each got to focus, and we each got to take responsibility for an instrumental part of that organization, which were going to be necessary for its success. And it grew fast. It grew ridiculously fast because of that focus and that responsibility. I'm sure it also grew because the market just happened to be perfectly right for what we were offering. There was a good deal of luck involved in that, which I'm very aware of now. At the time, it just seemed very easy. My second big organization I started, the Tamashii Drummers, similar thing. There, I was the business guy. I was the one who had experience running businesses and doing startups and understanding how to market. It was funny, tables have turned, right? Now, all those things I didn't know in my first business, in the past 15 years since then, I had learned those skills. I'd run many startups. I'd launched companies. I'd done incorporations. I'd worked with accountants. I knew all those things, and my two partners didn't. They got to do product. So one of them was a music teacher and understood composition, understood teaching, understood songwriting, understood not so much recording, but different aspects of creating that experience and creating the product, whereas I handled the business, the marketing, the recruitment, the promotions, the branding, gigs, collecting fees from students, finding space for the facility. All of these things became my responsibility. And in that case, our third person, Brian, he was responsible for creating equipment. We needed drums. We needed something unique that we couldn't easily buy, and we didn't have the money to buy, even if we could walk up to a store to do it. So we made it ourselves. And if it weren't for him and his contribution and his dedication to taking responsibility for that, the team never would have happened. All three of us were absolutely instrumental in making this work. Any one of us taken away, it would have been like a three-legged stool with half a leg falling over on its ass. Now, this is a very important thing to point out, is that none of us were really experts in what we did. In a sense, we were. Jane was a professional school teacher. She knew music, and specifically, she'd minored in percussion, so she had a good idea. But she's not Japanese. She never really learned taiko professionally from Japanese professionals. She'd never really taught taiko before. She'd taught a little bit of percussion, but more in one-on-one lessons. You want a group of 25 adults who you're trying to steer how to play a song? That's a little bit different. Experiences are all different. She wasn't yet an expert in that skill. I'd run many businesses. I'd done many startups, but for the most part, they were tech businesses. Performing arts had different demands. I now had to promote in a different way. I now had to make it exciting, and exciting to different people than I was used to selling to. Recruiting students, something I'd never had to do before. Totally different kind of marketing, different kind of website, different kind of brand, different kind of information and materials. Very creativity oriented and very ethnically charged. Totally different from any tech business that I've done. Brian was an engineer. He happens to manage boats for Fullers and keep them running. Never built a drum in his life. But because he was able to take responsibility for that, he could figure out what he knew and what he didn't know and close those gaps enough to create a successful outcome. And I think far more than knowledge and experience and skill and expertise is that ability to own and take full responsibility for your section of the company, for your piece that contributes to its success. If you can do that, you can achieve success without any special skills. All right? So that's the first thing to notice. The second thing to notice is that in the early days, the three of us had a vision, and the vision was simply this vague idea of, dang, this is fun, we want to do this, this is exciting. Our motivation was purely, really emotional and based on some YouTube videos and maybe a live performance that we'd seen. That was the source of our excitement, but it was enough. We all had a common vision, pretty closely identical, I think, in terms of what we would like to see happen. We couldn't describe it, we couldn't draw a picture of it, but we loved the idea of getting a few students and having fun with them. not paying students. We never thought anyone would pay us to teach them Japanese drumming. That would be ridiculous, right? So at that time, we had absolutely no expectations of that. As we grew, those expectations would change. We'd keep moving forward a little bit, and from that new place, we'd develop a new expectation of what we could do next. And then things would change at certain points. At certain points, we grew to a certain size of students that we needed a bigger place. We now had costs. We now had a venue that we needed to cover. We now needed more equipment. At some point, we needed a van. When we started doing performances, we needed to pay for petroleum and for parking and for van maintenance. And all these things started to take money. And then this was my responsibility. At that point, I had to figure out, okay, how do we charge the students? How do we make this work? How do we start charging for gigs? How much can we charge for gigs? How do I quote that? How do I get the pricing and the information to gig organizers? How much is too much? How much is too little? What's the right number here? That was my responsibility. Why? Because no one else knew how to do that. Despite the fact that I was definitely not an expert in determining pricing or doing marketing or advertising, being able to take sole responsibility for that gave me some way to focus my attention, and the responsibility meant that I had something to deliver. So we kept going, we kept growing, we kept seeing change, we kept seeing growth. Massive changes occurred. There were certain points at which we had over 100 students at our dojo. That was a massive landmark milestone. When we did our first concert, that was a big challenge we wanted to tackle. We've now done 4 concerts. When we wanted to buy a proper equipment van, and we really needed one because our last one had broken down, we needed $25,000 cash. New challenge, new interesting thing for us to tackle as a team and figure out how do we get there. There were constantly new things and new progressions that as a group we were able to work out and sort together. Now this is interesting. The original management of the group has since changed. About 4 years in, Brian, our engineer, needed to step back. He couldn't handle the active weekly, every weekend training responsibilities of being part of the group and being a performer in the group. And he was going through a personal life crisis. And then he ended up meeting a lovely woman, Sayuri, and getting married, and his attention was focused on her for quite some time. He's now rejoined, but not as one of the leaders of the group. He just wants to be a student and enjoy participating in the classes and learning. And he is no longer building the drums. We needed to sort and replace his responsibility. Now the group is large enough that we can pull together the funds to buy actual equipment from Japan if we really want to. We're currently importing from the US drums from Japanese manufacturers there. And this change at first felt like it was going to be a deal breaker. It felt like without Brian, we can't build more drums, we can't repair our drums, we can't reskin them when they break. The team's gradually going to curl up and die without a Brian. We were wrong. There is a certain point that once you've gotten past that initial point, your leadership structure can change and the organization can adapt because you've still got the basic ingredients. You've got the fertile imagination, you've got the incentive and the motivation, the desire to create something as a community. And you've got multiple people able to take those responsibilities. And those are the key ingredients, I think. So Brian is no longer part of the active administration. And Jane, our original teacher, has stepped back as well. Into her place, some of the lead performers have stepped. Now instead of one head teacher, we have 10 teachers, and they each take different level classes. We've got teachers taking our performer level class, and we have a red zone class, we have a silver zone class, we have a green zone class when there are enough people for that one. We have a yellow zone class, a white zone class, and we have an introduction to taiko class. Each of these classes run an hour and a half every Saturday. So we've got different teachers taking responsibilities for different parts, distributing the load, making sure that the students are all progressing to the next level gradually, and developing their own skills as well in taiko and in teaching and in performing and in community connection and relations. And The beautiful thing is that now responsibility can be shifted. Now that the seed has sprouted and grown, change can happen and it can weather that storm. I think it's very similar to the idea of a seed in a garden. You need that fertile soil. You need the water, you need the sunlight, you need the seed. Before it sprouts, that seed is pretty fragile. Its ability to sprout or not to sprout are going to be very condition dependent. Once it sprouts and becomes a more and more mature plant, the stronger it gets, the more intense of a situation it can weather. If that acorn becomes a giant oak tree, it can handle branches being torn off. It may be able to handle a hurricane. It can handle all kinds of situations that the seed never would have survived at all. And that strength is created by the community and the entrenched spirit of the organization as it's grown and matured. These are a few thoughts on creating organizations. Now I'm really excited to watch Brojo grow. I can see that what's happening in Brojo's case is that there is a point in which to grow the organization you need to learn as a leader to let go. And what that means is that you need to be willing to give up responsibility and control to other people. You need to be willing to say, you know what? If I try to do everything, this organization is going to get, at most, 20 hours of attention a week because I have to do other things that feed me and pay the rent. If I can find 10 people each willing to put in 5 hours a week in addition to my 20, now we've got 70 hours a week of growth, time, of attention. And I can't be in more place than once, but take 10 people, and you can cover a lot of territory. You can have a lot of meetings. You can get a lot of things done concurrently that there's no way that you can do alone. Letting go is the next key to significant growth. If you look at, for example, Tony Robbins' organization, which is sort of the epitome of a large self-development organization that can touch and change the lives of a lot of people. You can see if you watch the video, I Am Not Your Guru. It's quite an interesting video. I really enjoy it. I watched it a few times now. But you can see portrayed quite clearly that Tony is the visionary. He's the guy who had the original dream, and he is passionate and, in fact, I would say obsessed with what he's trying to do. He is the engine. There's no doubt about that. But he is not the one making everything happen. He has a massive team of people behind the scenes that pull it all together, that without them, the entire thing would fall on its face. He would never be able to scale it. That scalability requires more hands and more feet, more arms and legs to make things happen, to bring change around. So that letting go, absolutely essential. I think those are the main points that I can identify right now that I've learned so far about organization growth. Starting with a group, a very small group. I think small group is important. If you have too many people, the vision will be too diluted, too many different directions. You'll have difficulty focusing. I would say 2 to 3 people is just about perfect. You need the ability to cover different skills. It's great if you have the different skills at the beginning. The main thing is identifying what's needed to grow the organization and then making absolutely certain that you can each take responsibility for your part in the organization. Beyond that, you don't know what's going to happen, but you can figure it out. You need persistence. Keep watering it, keep devoting time to it, keep devoting attention to it, keep meeting to discuss what's needed next, what's working, what's not working, those little points of reflection, which we just call team meetings. Those are very, very important to the growth of the organization. Otherwise, people end up heading in different directions. They have no idea what's going on. They don't know where they can be useful, and it's just not even top of mind in their day and in their life. Whereas those team meetings bring it to, yes, these are the things I should be working on. And that's very helpful. Give it time, let it grow, keep cycling, and then at some point when it hits a certain point of growth that you are feeling stressed, that is an important signal that you need to start involving other people and learning to let go. If you want this organization to grow any more, you need to start giving up pieces of responsibility and trusting others to take that responsibility for you. I hope these are helpful.